Rights Away Committee. I would like to welcome you all to this meeting, which is both taking place here at Oak House and being broadcast live on YouTube. Agenda item number 1, to note the appointment of Councillor Russell Dodd as Chairman and Councillor Brian Wheatcroft as Vice Chairman of the Planning and Rights Away Committee at full council on the 22nd of May 2025. Please, item number 2, to note the membership of the Planning and Rights Away Committee 2025-26 municipal year as reflected on the agenda. The committee being Councillors Janette Barlow, Councillor Alan Byte, Councillor Andy Brown, Councillor Steve Carr, Councillor Faz Choudhury, Councillor James Gamble, Councillor Richard Lowe, Councillor David Smith and Councillor Sam Smith. Item agenda number 3, the minutes of the last meeting held on the 11th of March 2025. The draft minutes of this last meeting held on 11 March 25 are included on item 1 of the agenda. Can we take those as a true record of that meeting, please? As most of the cabinet members from that meeting are no longer here. We'll move that along. Thank you.
I mean, how can we vote on that properly because we weren't here?
There's no vote required. Thank you. Item number 4. Are there any apologies for absence?
Chairman, I have apologies from Councillor Gamble for other reasons, with Councillor Jim Vernon substituting, and I have apologies from Councillor Lowe for other reasons, with Councillor Kevin Brown substituting.
Thank you. Item number 5, declarations of interest by members and officers. Do any members or officers present have any interests to declare?
Thank you, Chair. I'm the divisional member for this area, but I'm here with a complete open mind.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Item number 6, declarations of lobbying. Do any members present have any instances of lobbying to declare? I, as chairman, would just like to note that the committee have had a general email sent from 2 different individuals, one individual being Dave Farrow and the other individual being Stuart Matthews. I'm not aware that any members have acted inappropriately or done anything they shouldn't have done, and I'm just declaring that for the meeting, for the cabinet in general. Has anybody else got any lobbying interest to declare? Thank you. Right then, item number 7.
Chairman, can we remind everybody to please use their mics as people are having trouble hearing in public out?
Okay. Could I just remind everybody in the room, people are having difficulty hearing in the public gallery. If you do speak, please would you put your microphone on by just pressing the button and the red light coming on, just for future reference. Thank you. Item number 7 on the agenda is the Bunny Materials Recycling Facility. Item 7 on the agenda is to consider a variation application for permission for the Bunny Materials Recycling Facility to increase the annual materials tonnage, heavy goods vehicle movements and operating hours with an updated dust management plan and noise restrictions to cover the new operating hours. I move the recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Chair. I second the recommendations and retain the right to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. I invite Jonathan Smith, Development Management Team Manager, to present the report and any further information relevant to the application. I understand Senior Planning Officer Debbie Ragg, who is the report author, is joining us online in case there are any questions requiring additional details. Jonathan, to present.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, planning permission is being sought for a Section 73 application to vary 5 planning conditions attached to the extant planning permission for the site, which can be summarised as follows. Condition 9, to vary the hours of operation at the site. Condition 15, to add 2 further noise sensitive receptors and set noise limits at those properties. Condition 20, to update the dust management plan, which the site would need to work in accordance with. Condition 31, to increase the number of HGVs permitted to enter and leave the site. And condition 32, to increase the annual throughput of waste at the site from 100,000 tonnes per annum up to 250,000 tonnes per annum. Bunny Materials Recycling Facility has been operating at the application site since the early 1990s, originally as a construction and demolition waste recycling facility, but since around 2013 as a facility which also processes incinerator bottom ash, or IBA. It is situated to the west of the A60 Loughborough Road, near Bunny Hill Top, to the south of Bunny Village, and to the southwest of the junction of the A60 and Goaton Lane, just beyond the former Bunny Brickworks land. The nearest residential properties are Woodside Farm, Hillside Farm, and Greenwood Lodge Care Home, all of which can be seen in this slide. More distant residential development is situated beyond Goaton Lane within Bunny Village to the north of the site. Also shown on this slide is Bunny Old Wood Local Wildlife Site and Nature Reserve, which lies to the southeast on the opposite side of the A60 Loughborough Road. The site benefits from a high degree of screening from a mix of mature vegetation and bunding, including to the southeastern boundary, providing screening along Bunny Hill and the A60 with limited viewpoints into the operational parts of the site. This drone shot shows the application site fully operational in 2021. The main IBA processing building can be clearly seen at the bottom of the photo, located towards the northern boundary, and the 4-metre high concrete walled storage bay for the receipt and storage of raw unprocessed IBA material. Steam can be seen coming off the working faces of the IBA material as it is moved. Stockpiles of processed IBA aggregate can be seen ready for transit off-site. Mobile plant is evident, and it is noted that these proposals would introduce 2 more pieces of mobile equipment, a telehandler and a loading shovel. This compares markedly to the site as it is at the present time, with it largely clear and accepting little to no waste deliveries at all. One of the photos shows the main IBA processing building, with all the fixed plant being contained within the building, including a feed hopper and conveyor belt system, with mobile plant including a crusher, loading shovels, hydraulic grab, trommel and conveyors. This next slide shows the approved layout of the site, which will not be varied by this application. Along the eastern edge of the IBAA storage area is a strip of land designated for overnight HGV parking. The key change being proposed in this application relates to an increase in throughput of material at the site from 100,000 tonnes per annum to 250,000 tonnes per annum, and the knock-on effects this increase would have on other operational matters, such as the hours of operation and the number of HGVs entering and leaving the site, and the potential increased impacts on the environment through issues such as noise and dust. The key benefit of the proposed development, if planning permission were to be granted, is that it would enable the applicant to make a level of capital investment into the site and to deliver economic benefits, including creating up to 15 new full-time jobs, as well as supporting those jobs already in place at the site. Its aim is for the site to become a more strategic asset for the company. Objections have been raised by Bunny, Bradmore and Rempston parish councils and 72 local residents, and a further representation in the form of a signatory pro forma signed by 324 residents. A summary of all those objections are in your report. Rushcliffe Borough Council has also raised an objection, as have the former County Councillor Reg Adair and former MP Ruth Edwards. Objections have mainly cited residential amenity impacts relating to traffic and increased lorry movements, with associated damage to roads, hazardous driving and danger to residents from dangerous emissions, and also impacts from dust, noise and the associated health issues. The principle of using the site for non-hazardous waste recycling operations has been established under previous extant planning consents. However, notwithstanding this, the significant increase in throughput of waste materials and the increase in operational hours and lorry movements to support this meant that it was considered necessary to review this aspect again. Essentially, does the proposal still amount to an acceptable use of the land at a throughput 2.5 times greater than that permitted? The key is whether the proposed changes would have any acceptable environmental effects, particularly in relation to the environment and amenity impacts raised as concerns. One of the main concerns raised regarding the increase in HGVs entering and leaving the site it regards HGVs entering and leaving the site, with the application proposing an increase from 100 HGV movements, that's 50 in and 50 out per day, subject to a maximum of 550 movements per week, increasing that to 240 movements per day, 120 in, 120 out, and a maximum of 1,440 movements per week. This slide shows a table summarising the impact of the proposed increase in HGV numbers on the A60 Bunny Hill, where 60% of HGVs would travel to and from the site. It demonstrates that the proposed increase in lorry movements would result in a 0.9% increase in the overall baseline daily flows of all traffic, with a 1.1% increase during the AM peak and a 1% increase during the PM peak. Whilst the increase in HGV traffic alone will be quite significant, as seen on this slide, this is set against a baseline of relatively low HGV traffic on this section of the A60. The additional lorries will be spread out over more hours, which are being proposed, including the evenings and Saturday afternoons and Sunday and bank and public holidays. The amenity impact of HGV movements for those residents living along the route has been considered and is set out in the report from paragraphs 171 to 178. It is concluded that the additional HGV trips and hours of operation would not result in an unacceptable impact on the amenity of residents living along the A60 transport route, largely due to the low levels of lorry movements involved. The vehicles will continue to follow a three-way directional split, with 30% of vehicles routing north through Bunny Village, 60% south, and 10% west along Goaton Lane, which in practice means that per hour, the proposals will generate an additional 4 HGV movements north through Bunny and Bradmore, where a significant number of properties, including Grade 2 listed properties, front the road, an additional 9 HGV movements going south, and finally one additional HGV movement going west. These additional movements will be well within the daily variations of traffic flows on the A60, which officers consider will generate low levels of amenity impact to those nearest sensitive residential properties. As such, the proposal will be compliant with the General Amenity Policy WCS 13 in the Waste Course Strategy, which supports extended waste treatment facilities where it has been demonstrated that there will be no unacceptable impact on the quality of life and those living nearby. It is noted that the County Council's noise consultant has been able to confirm that the increase in road traffic noise levels generated by the increase of HGV movements along the local road network is considered to be negligible. This should be set against the advice in the MPPF at paragraph 116, which states that development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds when there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network following mitigation will be severe. This next slide shows the site access off the A60. As part of the applicant's transport assessment, a junction capacity assessment has been undertaken in relation to this junction based on the proposed uplift in HGV movements to and from the site. This has demonstrated that the junction would operate within capacity during the morning and evening peaks when the uplift in development traffic is added in, with demand for no more than 1 HGV in and out of the site at any one time. Highway officers consider that the proposed increases in HGVs would not give rise to any significant network capacity and highway safety concerns, subject to the increased number of HGVs being controlled by condition. The application is therefore considered compliant with relevant policies in the Waste Local Plan and the MPPF. As part of the consideration of the application, 2 rebuttals were submitted by the applicant regarding air quality and noise. As part of the rebuttal to the noise concerns and as a result of further discussions between officers and the applicant, the proposed variation to condition 9, which originally sought to increase the hours when crushing and screening would be allowed on Saturdays from between 8:30 AM and 12:30 PM and increasing that to between 7 AM and 4 PM, there would now be no crushing and screening operations taking place at all on Saturdays. Such operations would also not take place on Sundays and public bank holidays. The proposed extended hours on Saturdays would therefore only involve waste deliveries and IBA processing within the main building, which would be fitted with new rapid closing roller shutter doors, which the applicant considers would be closed 80% of the time, only opening to allow material to be taken in and out of the building. On Sundays, public and bank holidays, only deliveries of IBA into the site will be permitted. Not allowing screening and crushing operations on Saturdays would ensure that weekend operations are quieter than what could be allowed at the present time in order to protect residential amenity, particularly for those living closest to the site. Overall, the noise levels during the proposed extended operating hours would remain below a rating level of less than 5 dB above the prevailing background noise levels, thereby ensuring a potential for low impact when assessed against the requirements of British Standards 4142. These levels will be secured by amendments to Condition 15 as set out on this slide. The noise levels would remain below an adverse impact threshold in compliance with the objectives of the saved Policy W3.9 of the Waste Local Plan and the MPPF. Waste operations have the potential to cause adverse impacts as a result of dust emissions. Stockpiled IBA and IBA aggregate can potentially create dust when the material is being loaded and transferred within the site during processing. However, saved Policy W3.10 of the Waste Local Plan identifies that dust emissions for waste processing can be managed and reduced by implementing appropriate dust mitigation practices. There are established dust suppression measures in place, including a water sprinkler system to spray storage bays and also mounted on the waste transfer building to spray the area in front of the building. Bowsers are used with dust suppressing water, the main control measure to prevent wind whipping of dust. Other measures include minimising drop heights, waste storage heights and volumes of material on site, and reducing the amount of activity on site during windy weather, including no tipping or screening of higher risk loads. A new dust management plan has been submitted in support of the application, which includes additional mitigation measures, including the installation of a weather station on site, the installation of sleeping policemen on the access road to reduce vehicle speeds, the reduction of stockpile pipes from 9 to 7 metres, reductions in drop heights for coarse materials, the use of a road sweeper on site at least 3 times a week, and daily inspections of the site. Rushcliffe Borough Council's Environmental Health Officer has confirmed that these dust management measures are both acceptable and achievable, and that the proposed dust control measures are recognised as industry best practice. These additional controls would be secured through an amended Condition 20, and on this basis, the extended operations are considered capable of being adequately controlled to prevent residual dust effects off-site in compliance with Waste Local Plan Safe Policy 3.10. Environmental controls covering the waste management operations will continue to be dealt with under a bespoke environmental permit authorised by the Environment Agency and enforced by them. Whilst the planning process is concerned about the acceptable use of land, the permit would deal with any pollution impacts on human health as raised in representations on the application. The EA has advised that the permit for the site may need to be varied, which would allow them to review any pollution and health impacts relating to the site. In terms of the planning balance, when balancing up the negative impacts against the benefits, the proposed development is considered to be acceptable. The weight given to the overall negative impacts is low due to the controls that will be in place and secured by conditions. Professional advice has been sought and the proposals have been amended accordingly, and further supporting information submitted in the form of 2 rebuttals covering noise and air quality, dust, and a further noise assessment. Whilst valid concerns raised by local residents are acknowledged, it is considered that the sustainable management of site operations would ensure that any adverse impacts are kept to acceptable levels. Officers have assessed noise, dust and HGV movements in related to the proposed increase in waste throughput and the associated increase in operating hours. Overall, the proposal accords with the provisions of the development plan, subject to a specific limitation of 150,000 tonnes of IBA waste, which would reflect the terms of the environmental permit. The proposed development is in accordance with key planning policies, Waste Core Strategy Policy WCS3, Future Waste Management Provision, ensuring increased amounts of IBA and commercial and demolition waste, which will be managed higher up the waste hierarchy in accordance with the overall aim of the plan, which is to achieve 70% recycling or composting of all waste by 2025. To deliver this aim, Waste Core Strategy Policy WCS3 gives priority to the proposed development as an extended waste recycling operation over other waste recovery and disposal facilities. Consistent with the objectives of Policy WCS3, the development would deliver more sustainable waste management at a higher level in the waste hierarchy. The benefits provided by the proposed development in the context of delivering high rates of sustainable waste management are given significant positive weight in the overall planning balance. The Minerals Local Plan in Policy MP5 is also clearly supportive of the proposal, as it would increase the supply of secondary and recycled aggregates, offsetting the need for primary minerals. The proposed development complies with the objectives of Waste Core Strategy Policy WCS8, as increased operations on an established site are more economic and less environmentally impactful than developing a new facility, making better use of existing IBA processing building, processing plant and transport infrastructure, and increasing the existing capacity. Indeed, it will maximise the use of the primary A road network to which the site has direct access. This policy lends in support to increasing capacity at the Bunny site, given that it has been demonstrated that the proposed development, subject to the suite of conditions proposed, is capable of being carried out without creating unacceptable environmental and immediate impacts from additional noise, dust and increased traffic, in accordance with the safe environmental protection policies in the Waste Local Plan and Waste Core Strategy Policy WCS 13. The conditions include the requirement for the applicant to hold quarterly site liaison meetings with local residents to discuss any concerns regarding the ongoing operation of the site. As such, it is considered that the proposed variations comply with the development plan taken as a whole, and there is no reason to withhold planning permission subject to planning conditions. It is therefore recommended that planning permission is granted subject to the planning conditions set out in Appendix 1 and rolling forward the Section 106 agreement for lorry routing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. I now invite Rebecca Ferguson to speak on the application. Rebecca, you're allowed to speak for 3 minutes, and we will indicate when there's 30 seconds left, so you're fully aware of how long you've got left. Okay? Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am Rebecca, a mum representing Bunny community, asking you to reject Johnson's application. Their ask is extraordinary: to increase annual waste processing from 100 to 250,000 tonnes and to operate 7 days a week, all year round, more than doubling HGV movements per day, which our home is not built to burden. But here's the truth: the expansion isn't needed. NCC's own waste needs assessment says there is a surplus waste capacity through to 2038. That alone should be reason enough to refuse this application. The site hasn't processed IBA waste since July 2023 and no C&D waste since earlier this year. If the site were so vital, why has it sat underused for nearly 2 years? But even more concerning is that 86% of all waste processed comes from outside the county, yet it's our lungs and our community bearing the impact. This directly violates WCS 11, the proximity principle, which states waste should be managed as close to its source as possible. And even Johnson's own planning application admits this violation. They've also already exceeded their 100 tonnes limit, as you've heard. What kind of message are you sending if you reward this kind of blatant non-compliance? Meanwhile, the AA has confirmed that they don't measure air quality, odour or dust near the site, even after complaints have increased, which means no one is monitoring the pollution we're being exposed to. So who then is protecting the people of Bunny and Nottinghamshire? To make matters worse, Johnson's removed their odour suppression systems, despite it being a condition of their original planning approval. Complaints increased, enforcement failed, and Johnson's continue to operate with impunity. But here's the hypocrisy. When a housing development was proposed nearby, Johnson's objected, claiming they could not guarantee safe levels of dust, noise or smell to any new residents. If they cannot meet basic environmental standards now, how can we trust them and justify this expansion? This is not NIMBYism. This is a community saying no more. You have a duty to protect the well-being of your constituents, not the profit of an operator shipping in waste from far beyond our community. Johnson's proposal breaches planning policy. They exceed legal limits and sets a dangerous precedent that companies break the rules and ask much more. I implore you, Chair and Councillors, please reject this application.
Thank you, Rebecca. Do officers wish to clarify any matters that have been raised there?
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on the comment made about there wasn't a need for the site. In the report at paragraph 69, I believe, is a response from our planning policy colleagues, and they acknowledge that the waste need assessment identifies sufficient recycling capacity for waste such as this, which will be coming into the site until 2038. But it also confirms that it's not the plan's intention to prevent further recycling capacity coming forward, as that would allow waste to be, as much waste as possible, to be treated as high up the waste hierarchy as possible. I just wanted to highlight that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca, could you just turn the... Thank you very much. I now invite Ian Clark to speak on the application. Ian, again, you'll be given 3 minutes and notification when there's 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. The application before you should not be addressed under the auspice of a Section 73 notice. A Section 73 notice which creates a new planning permission fails to take into account certain issues such as biodiversity. And it should be noted that the Bunny waste recycling facility is located in the Greenbelt. It was originally approved for 100,000 tonnes per annum. They're now applying for 250,000 tonnes per annum, but in their own application admit to flouting the planning laws in 21 and 22, where they processed 150,000 and 170,000 tonnes. How can this company be trusted with such an increase as to more than double the size of their operation? The site's history shows a continuing disregard for operating conditions and the existing planning permissions. Operating conditions include the applicant applied and received a temporary planning permission in 2014 to expand onto the Bunny Brickwork site for stockpiling. That ceased in planning and in licence terms in 2015. The applicant failed to reinstate the Bunny Brickworks boundary and has, with impunity, continued to use that land for stocking, parking and works associated with his operation of the Bunny recycling facility. This is unacceptable. The Bunny Brickworks development, which, as mentioned earlier, they objected to, was actually approved on appeal. So therefore, the Bunny Brickworks mixed-use development, which is for up to 110 dwellings and 5,600 square metres of employment, which incidentally will create between 80 and 90 jobs. Some comparison concerning the 15 that this application looks to provide. As far as the applicant is concerned, he removed the whole of the southern boundary. Since 2015, he's used the site for stockpiling and another area of consent.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Do officers wish to clarify any matters that Mr Clark has raised?
Thanks, Chair. The comment was raised about the green belt. That's been covered in detail in the report. And I think in particular, one of the key criteria for considering developments in the green belt is the impact on the openness of the green belt. There would be no, actually stockpile heights would actually be lowered. And so as part of the assessment that's in the report, paragraphs 148, 149, it's considered there will be no additional impact on the green belt, including on its openness. And just another point to raise, and this was clarified during the member training that we obviously had recently, in terms of the history of the applicant is not a material consideration. I think it's acknowledged in the report that there has been issues at the site in the past. The report highlights that we've had to serve breach condition notices in the past relating to the increase in tonnages that they operated under and the resultant increases in HGVs. But we have an application before us to vary an existing planning permission on the site, and members should focus on the changes being proposed as part of their deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan Smith. I now invite Rob Wilby to speak on the application. Again, Mr Wilby, you have 3 minutes. You will be given notification when you have 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name's Rob Wilby, and I am a resident of Bradmore and parent of a child that attended Bunny School. I'm also a professor with 35 years of experience in weather and climate research. This includes air quality data analysis and modelling, and I've worked for the Environment Agency too. This gives me an understanding of environmental impact assessment, monitoring and management. My objections to the application are based on this expertise. Now, as you may be aware, air pollution is the largest environmental risk to public health in the UK. According to the government, fine particulates and nitrogen dioxide contribute to an estimated 28 to 36,000 deaths annually. None of these deaths are directly attributable to a single pollutant. Rather, exposure to particulates is linked to increased risks of cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, lung cancer and other health issues, ultimately leading to reduced life expectancy. This means that the integrity of the amended dust management plan really matters. In my representation of February 2024, I raised several concerns. First, that no actual dust measurements or site-specific weather data were used in the air quality assessment. Instead, dust information was based on uncertain DEFRA modelling of annual mean particulate concentrations near the site. Second, there are discrepancies about the wind speeds assumed to generate airborne dust at the site, and hence the criteria for stopping operations. The air quality analysis used 10 knots, but the dust management plan has a less precautionary 15 knots. Third, halting site operations for dust control relies on visual checks of a windsock by site staff, day and night. Ideally, the trigger would be from real-time measurements of wind speed at a well-sited weather station. The amended dust management plan still falls short in terms of assurances. First, that management practices will no longer fail to comply with the constraints and controls on site operations for air quality, dust and odour, unlike in the past. Second, that the environmental monitoring, compliance assessment and enforcement of the environmental permit are sufficiently robust. That the operator will not exceed the consented IBA tonnage, as has happened previously. On this basis, there is reasonable doubt about the effectiveness and enforcement of the dust management plan. Please protect our communities by rejecting this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Wilby. Do any of the officers wish to clarify any matters that have just been raised?
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I'd like to point out, and this is confirmed at paragraph 228, is that yes, the air quality assessment undertaken has been forwarded on to key consultees, in particular Rushcliffe Borough Council's Environmental Health Officer, who has concluded that it is acceptable and the proposed dust measures are recognised as industry best practice. And whilst we do have an objection in general from Rushcliffe Borough Council on the application on this particular matter, the Environmental Health Officer hasn't raised any concerns.
Thank you, Jonathan Smith. I now invite Councillor Edivine to speak on behalf of Money Parish Council. Again, Councillor Edivine, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and we'll notify you when there's 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Members of the committee, nearly every application on this site in the last 10 years has been retrospective. Notwithstanding the blatant disregard for previously imposed conditions on this site, what I'd like to have the committee focus on is the loss of amenity to local residents if this application is approved. IBA apparently has a distinctive odour. If you can smell it, that means there are chemicals present, and who knows what those chemicals are. But the fact is that fresh air is odourless. Previous variations to planning conditions have acknowledged this odour, and action has been put in place to mitigate the problem. Conditions have never been complied with, and odour remains a problem. None of the agencies that should have enforced the conditions have acted, and the Environment Agency have admitted in writing that they have failed to act on any complaints received. In the applicant's latest submission, a dust management plan fails to even mention odour and its control, yet previously the applicant has acknowledged the need for odour control, which they have failed to comply with. And believe me, there are plenty of complaints about odour from around the surrounding area. In objecting to a proposed housing development and other employment land being brought into use, the applicant has suggested that their failure to control dust, noise and odour would be detrimental to any future development of the land not controlled by the applicant. I'm astounded that the recommendation is to approve the applicant's expansion of this site, where it is clear that everything points to a significant loss of amenity to residents nearby, within the village of Bunny itself and further afield to neighbouring parishes, and particularly Ash Lane in Costock, which backs onto the site, let alone the impact on potential residents should the planning permission be granted at the appeal for the new housing which has been granted at appeal. This site is not currently active, and if it is reactivated, based on past history, as you've already heard, more than 80% of the recycling will come from outside of the county. Indeed, with IBA, it comes from all over the country. This can hardly be described as a model of sustainable recycling. So I urge you to please reject this application for the sake of local residents whose amenity will be blighted if you approve.
Thank you, Councillor Edivine. Do the officers wish to clarify any matters that have been raised there?
Yeah, just on the issue of odour monitoring and control, that is a matter for the Environment Agency to cover in the permit. I appreciate, yes, I think we have had controls in the past on previous permissions relating to odour, and there can often be a bit of a blurring between the lines as to what we control as a planning authority and what the Environment Agency controls through the permit. But the National Planning Policy Framework at paragraph 201, and this is set out in paragraph 152 of the report, it makes it clear that it is the Pollution Controls Organisation's responsibility, i.e. the EA, to control processes or emissions, and that planning authorities should assume that these regimes would operate effectively, taking on board what the first speaker said about the lack of EA monitoring at the site. And that's further reinforced by the National Planning Policy for Waste, which states that waste planning authorities should work on the assumption that the relevant pollution control regime will be properly applied and enforced. We do work closely with the Environment Agency. We meet them regularly, and I'm sure if planning permission is approved, or even if it's not, and the operator returns to operate the site under its existing permission, that the monitoring of the site by both the planning authority and the pollution control authority, we will work closely with the Environment Agency on those matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan Smith. I now invite Nigel Gould to speak as agent on the application. Nigel, you'll be given 3 minutes and you'll be notified at 30 seconds when you've got left to speak. Thank you.
Chair and members of the Planning Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. As Chair said, my name is Nigel Gould, the planning agent, and I speak on behalf of the applicant. I also have Trevor Burton with me, who is the Head of Compliance at Johnson Aggregates. We have been in discussion with Nottingham County Council planners for over 2 years now in relation to this proposal. We submitted a pre-application request in June 2023, which informed this planning application submission. We've also submitted 2 detailed responses to representations and consultee comments. The presentation of this application to committee is therefore the product of a significant amount of work by the applicant, Nottingham County Council and Rushcliffe Borough Council over a 2-year period. Whilst the concerns of the community are understood, we believe we have addressed these concerns, which is reflected fully in the observations by the officer in paragraphs 108 to 261. The officer's report follows the headline subjects from the representations and draws a conclusion at the end of each topic, which in turn finishes with an overall conclusion in paragraph 261, which states, "It has been demonstrated that the proposal represents an acceptable increase in processing capacity and, as stated, is in compliance with the objectives of policy WC13 and with respect to the relevant waste policies. The Minerals Local Plan, policy MP5, is also clearly supportive of the proposal, as it would increase the supply of secondary and recycled aggregates, offsetting the need for primary minerals. As such, it is considered that the proposed variations comply with the development plan taken as a whole, and there is no reason to withhold planning permission subject to planning conditions." The officer's report is full and robust, with a logical progression that leads to the conclusion. We support the officer recommendation and conditions appended and urge members to support this. To reinforce that, I would like to focus on one aspect mentioned in paragraph 32, and that is the serving of the 2 breach of condition notices. The applicant is the leading expert in recycling aggregates and understands the need to balance inward investment with compliance. It is clear that the applicant got this balance wrong in 2023. Paragraph 32 of the report lists the applicant's response to this, but it has been twofold: the closure of the site and the engagement with Nottingham County Council planners to find a planning solution. And secondly, the establishment and recruitment of a compliance team. The conditions from the extant permission have been replicated with additional conditions relating to the upgraded noise monitoring, 15, and site liaison meetings, 36. With the conditions and informatives recommended at paragraph 271, the officer has provided the necessary framework for the applicant on further levels of control for Nottingham County Council planning. For these reasons, I urge members to follow officer's advice and support this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Okay. Yeah. Do officers wish to clarify any matters that have been raised there? No? Thank you. I will now open the floor for debate. Does the committee have any comments or questions regarding the application? Please raise your hand.
Can I just ask, you know, like,
Excuse me, councillor, can we just get a, right, I'll call you to speak once we've
All
got
right,
everybody's hand
yeah.
raised. Thank you. So,
Thank you, Chair. Usually, I haven't been on planning for a few years, but before when I was, there was an item to clarify what officers said before the debate was started. So if I could do that before getting into my contribution, that would be appreciated. Jonathan, when you presented the report, you mentioned conditions requiring sweeping 3 times a week of the dust and on the roadside, etc. I can see that there is under condition 13 and a different condition 19. It does mention that, but it doesn't mention anything about Sundays or bank holidays. What assurances have you sought as a planning officer team to ensure that that condition specifically relates to weekend operation, which the application is based on extending the hours? So I just want that clarified, and then I'll come to my contribution, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
In terms of dust management, yeah, there's condition 20 requires the site to be operated in accordance with the updated dust management plan. That will be required to be, the site will be required to be operated in accordance with that updated dust management plan all the time it is open. If that clarifies that point.
So that includes bank holidays and weekends. And if that's not done, residents can ask for enforcement. We can go out and check and enforce against that.
Yeah, yeah. Our enforcement officers do work out of hours where need requires.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarity. If I can come on to my contributions then, Mr. Chairman, that'd be appreciated. So I want to focus, if I may, on the HGV movements. Our waste local plan, to quote what Mr. Smith said, was that it's fine, HGVs are fine as long as it has no unacceptable impact. That was a quote from the waste local plan. Just to be clear, I don't sit on the fence very often, so I'm not going to sit on the fence today. What complete nonsense is that? And anybody can interpret that in any way they wish. And sitting in an office at County Hall, a 22.5% increase on HGVs may not be an unacceptable impact, but if you live on the roads surrounding the application site, I can bet your bottom dollar that 22.5% increase will have a massive impact on those that are there. So that line in our waste local plan is as clear as mud, and I think maybe we should update that going forward. If you live next to the site, as we've heard from the residents contributing to the meeting, and the applicant has put in the paperwork as well, it's clear that this noise and dust is created. And if you live there at the moment, you're probably out at work or got families and you're out of your property during the existing operating hours. Sundays and bank holidays, I would guess, would be very different. You're probably at home enjoying time with your family in your garden, and it's probably the only day of the week at the moment that your washing on the line doesn't get dust on or come in smelling of the odour that we've had described to us today. And I think that's unacceptable. If we have these sites next to residential properties, then we should be allowing getting that balance between the residential aspects of the area and this site. And I think the application in front of us, particularly on condition 9, to change those hours, moves the balance far in the wrong direction. And a 22.5% increase in HGVs along that road on Sundays and bank holidays, to me, is unacceptable. And I would interpret the existing waste plan to echo that, and therefore I will be voting against this application on that grounds. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Barlow, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say, obviously, there's a lot of discussion around health issues here. Do we have any studies, any health studies on what this pollution causes or potentially could cause? Have we got anything to back up that? That obviously I find is a great concern, considering it is quite a residential area. There is the chance that there is going to be further houses built nearby. So therefore, going forward, how many sick people are we going to have? So I would like to see some health studies before I could even agree to any of this. And regarding the lorries, I take on board what Councillor Smith said. 22% increase is vast, and I take on board what Jonathan Smith said regarding sensitive properties. In my area, I have a property that is a listed building. It's a Grade 2 listed building that now has lorries thundering past, and she now has cracks appearing in her house. So the fact that you think this will not have an impact, I find very strange. So who's going to police these lorries and make sure that they adhere to the speed limits? No one's answered that question, have they? So on those grounds, I'm afraid I will not be supporting this application.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillor Andy Brown, next.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to concur with Councillor Smith on the amount of trucks through the area, but giving a little bit of local knowledge, as well as having to have all the trucks from this application. It's also the preferred truck routes, lorry routes, whichever you want to call it, to British Gypsum just down the road. So add the two together, and that is a massive increase. I'd like to point out paragraph 151 and 152 in the application on consideration of the environmental effects of the development. Paragraph 198 of the NPPF states that planning decisions should ensure that any new development is appropriate for its location, taking into account the likely effects, including cumulative effects of pollution on health, living conditions and the natural environment, as well as the potential sensitivity of the site or the wider area to impacts that could arise from this development. And 152 clearly states the NPPF at paragraph 201 makes reference to the fact that is the pollution control organisation's responsibility to control processes or emissions, and that planning authorities should assume that these regimes would operate effectively. This is further reinforced by the NPPW at paragraph 7, which states that waste planning authorities should work on the assumption that the relevant pollution control regime would be properly applied and enforced. Well, from what we've heard today, Mr. Chairman, is that some of these have not been enforced. And how do we know they're not going to be enforced in the future? So together with my doubts on enforcement and also the truck movements, I will be voting against this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I believe it's Councillor Steve Carr next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the most overriding thing that we need to think about here is amenity, which is a consideration that's permissible. And it has to be noted, councillors, that we're not increasing the tonnage from 100,000 to 250,000. At the moment, the amount of throughput on this site is negligible. So we're going to be going from virtually zero to 250,000 in one go, which to me is a big increase. However, our decision's been made more difficult by some of the consultees. Paragraph 77, for example, national highways, no objection. NCC highways, Rushcliffe, no objection. Via, no objection. And we do put ourselves at a bit of a risk here, because if we do refuse the application, of course, the applicant has the right of appeal. And I would imagine that an inspector will take note of the fact that some of these consultees have said they've got no objection. However, that doesn't mean that they're right. I do have great concern. First of all, on paragraphs 20 to 24, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7, but 8 retrospective applications. 8. retrospective applications. I think that is unacceptable, Mr. Chairman. And on page 15, and Councillor Sam Smith has already brought this up, if this does go through, I think one of the things as a council, if we do vote it through, is to insist that they don't deliver on Sundays, bank holidays, etc., and that that plant does not operate on those days. I think that is totally unacceptable for the people that live in this area. And then finally, on 29 to 32, I don't think the issue here is enforcement. I think enforcement has been happening because this company have had 2 breaches of condition notices. One of them was for being 77% above the allowed tonnage going through. So you can argue that this is a retrospective planning application because it's not 100,000. Given all the weight of that and the possibility that on appeal we may lose, I'm going to ignore that, and I cannot bring myself to actually support this application, so I will be voting against.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor David Smith.
Before Councillor.
Just want to say,
Sorry,
2 of them.
Can you just pause a minute?
If I can let members know that they must base their decisions solely on the application currently before the committee, assessed on its own merits and in accordance with the plans and the policies, and of course the material planning considerations. You do not consider retrospective applications or past enforcement actions issues which do not apply to the current application being brought before you. Thank you.
Can I just come back on that, Mr. Chairman? If we can't give consideration to them, why are they in the report? Surely if they're in the report, they're there for us to consider.
Could somebody provide an answer to that, please?
We routinely provide part of the report will routinely include the planning history of the site. It's to give the context. But no, I accept your point. But you know, we include that detail to give you an overall view of you know, the history of the site and how we've got to where we are today.
Councillor David Smith, thank you.
Yeah, there's a few questions. 1 or 2 of the other members have already asked the questions, so them 2 I'm not going to mention again. The HGVs, you know, when the old brickwork site was going, there would have been quite a lot of traffic from that, I would have thought at the time, you know, coming out. I can't see it making a lot of difference for the HGVs at all, actually, on the road, you know, because when that site would have been going, there would have been quite a lot of traffic. But it's the odour what's one of the things I'm very concerned about, if there's anything we can actually do about that. And the dust, when they talk about the dust, you know, if they got the very fine water sprays, will that keep it down? And then, what was the other one? Well, I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Jim Vernon.
I wasn't going to ask a question, because having read through this, but on the issue of retrospective, we can't consider retrospective, but there have been breaches on this site, so I'm more interested in the monitoring. I've seen monitoring mentioned, but for a lay person's explanation, please, what does monitoring consist of?
Could the officers respond to that? Thank you.
I was going to come back on various points raised by various members when all the questions were done, if that's okay.
That's fine by me. Thank you. Are there any other councillors wishing to speak? Personally, I've got a couple of questions just regarding the actual waste. If this waste that's coming into this site wasn't processed, what would happen to it? And also, Councillor David Smith raised a point about the previous HGV loads in the local area. Have we got any information regarding that from when it was Brickworks that was fully operational? So we've got some way of comparing that to the new application. Thank you.
Would you like me to come back now?
Yes, if you come back now, thank
you. So sorry, Councillor Sam Smith, who raised the issue of HGVs and certainly their amenity impact, and in terms of the volumes, and I think as almost Councillor Carr has alluded to, you know, we have not had an objection from the Highway Authority on this. They do not consider the uplift to be significant. And I'll just point you as well to what I mentioned in my presentation about, you know, not all of the lorries leaving the site will all go in the same direction. The anticipation is that 60% of them will turn right and head up Bunny Hill away from Bunny Village. 30% of them will go through Bunny Village, and that's considered to roughly average out at 4 HGV movements an hour, additional HGV movements an hour going through Bunny and continuing north up to Bradmore. And highways officers have said that they consider that is probably wouldn't reflect any difference to the normal variations you see in HGV movements along what is an A road. It's part of the primary highway network in the county, and it's designed to carry large volumes of traffic, be they HGVs or cars. In terms of the immediate impact as well, we did ask our VIA's noise engineer about the noise implications of the additional HGVs to try and get an idea of what the immediate impacts will be. And again, he raised no concerns on that matter. Councillor Barlow asked if any health studies have been carried out regarding the material. In paragraphs 241 onwards of the report, says the toxicity of the IBA has been raised as a concern by a number of local residents. The EA has been able to verify that in terms of their classification of the IBA material, it is non-hazardous waste, but is not inert. But there's nothing to indicate that there's any health impacts associated with the treatment of IBA. The pollution control authorities, in this case the Environmental Health Team and the Environment Agency, have not raised any concerns relating to the impacts on public health associated with these extended waste operations, and the air quality assessment has not identified or raised any health issues in relation to air quality rating levels, particularly with regards to primary age children at the village school in Bunny. In terms of, Councillor Barlow also mentioned speed limits. Speed limits are a matter for the police to enforce. Councillor Brown mentioned, yes, he mentioned that the A60 through Bunny is also used by British gypsum lorries. The highway comments we received will have taken, you know, the transport assessment has been undertaken, showing existing levels of HGV movements. The proposed uplift in HGVs have been factored in, and again, the Highway Authority is not raising an objection to the application. And in terms of the EA monitoring, I think Councillor Brown reread something that I've read out previously in terms of, you know, what the NPPF states, in that we basically need to satisfy ourselves that the pollution control regime will work effectively alongside the planning regime. Councillor Carr, he did ask the question about what is it about Sundays and bank holidays. At paragraph, it's quite early on in the report, just after paragraph 34 in your report, page 15, it sets out what the proposed condition 9 would be. And as you can see, in terms of Sunday and bank holiday operations, the only activities that would be allowed between 9 AM and 4 PM would be waste deliveries, including the acceptance of IBA waste. So there'll be no processing on site during that time. There'll be no export of processed material, no operation of any plant. So very minimal activities on Sundays, public and bank holidays. Councillor David Smith asked about HGVs from the brickworks in the past. We don't have that information to hand. But again, what I would point you to is that we're considering the application before us. You've got all the details you need about what the uplift in HGVs is, again, based on existing levels and the officer's conclusions on that. Councillor Vernon, yes, asked about the monitoring of the site. So what does it entail? So yes, we have a team of monitoring enforcement officers, and once the site becomes operational again, they will visit the site probably 4 times a year, and they effectively go through. You've got the suite of conditions which are recommended to be attached if planning permission is granted, and they will basically work through those suite of conditions and ask themselves, are operations on site being carried out in accordance with the planning permission and all the conditions attached to it? That is effectively the purpose of the monitoring report. If there are any concerns, they will raise them with the applicant, and if they're not addressed, then we do have those powers to take more formal enforcement action if we need to. So that's basically what our monitoring regime does, and we've got a number of officers in the team that carry out those works. And then finally, Councillor Dodd, you asked what would otherwise happen to the waste. Well, historically, waste such as this from incinerators, and similarly as well, the waste that used to come out of our power stations across the county was routinely landfilled. So that is lower in the waste hierarchy. You've seen the waste hierarchy diagram, and so being able to process material and make a new product out of it is moving the waste higher up the waste hierarchy, and that's also something that's happened to the ash that's come out of the power stations in the last 10 to 15 years. Far more recycling of that type of material. I think that's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the officers for presenting, speakers, and all the members of the committee for putting their opinions and deliberation forward. There's no clear consensus here, I think, so I'm going to move this to the vote. Would all those in favour of approving the recommendations please raise your hand? Would all those against approving the recommendations please raise your hand? Are there any abstentions? That's carried. The recommendations are therefore approved. We'll now take a short 5-minute recess and a comfort break, and we'll come back in 5 minutes. Thank you, committee. Item 8 on the agenda, 65 Derby Road, Kirkby and Ashfield. Item 8 on the agenda is to consider an application for change of use from a residential dwelling to a small 2-bed home for children who are in the care of the local authority. I move the recommendations in the report.
I second the recommendations and retain the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. I invite Jonathan Smith, Team Manager, Development Management, to present the report. Debbie Ragg, Senior Planning Officer, is also online in case of any detailed points of clarification. Jonathan to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks a change of use from a residential dwelling located at 65 Derby Road, Kirkby and Ashfield, to a 2-bed home for children in the care of the local authority, with no external alterations to the facade of the dwelling other than replacement of obscure glazing to first floor windows on the property's northern and southern elevations. There would, however, be internal alterations to the first floor of the 4-bedroom property, involving adding en suites to 3 of the 4 bedrooms. The property is situated approximately 2 bus stops situated around 90 metres from the property for travel into Kirkby and Ashfield town centre and to Nottingham, and a local railway station which is on the Robin Hood line approximately 2 kilometres away. The property is set back from the road on a relatively large plot within an area which is residential in character, with a mix of semi-detached and detached 2-storey properties. The nearest residential properties are the immediately adjacent neighbouring houses numbers 63 and 67 Derby Road. Front gardens of the properties on Derby Road are generally well screened, with mature hedgerows, with house frontages having off-street car parking, with many having relatively large driveways and garages. Curbside parking along Derby Road is generally limited by the high volume of traffic using the road. The relatively wide pavements and grass verges along the main A road and the service road means that there is a substantial distance between the application site and properties on the opposite side of Derby Road. This is clearly shown on this slide, with the application site being viewed from the front of 88 Derby Road. There's that slide there, yeah. Whilst there have been 4 letters of objection from local residents, it can be seen that for those residents on the opposite side of Derby Road who have raised concerns about the children's home, the significant separation distance between the proposed site and these properties means that this would significantly mitigate any residential amenity impacts for these particular residents. Moving on to the following 2 slides, residential amenity impacts have been raised by the occupier of number 67 Derby Road, including concerns about overlooking from the first floor side window on the northern elevation. To address the concerns regarding privacy, the clear glass window clearly shown in this photograph is to be replaced with obscure glazing to mitigate any views from this window. There are also views towards 63 Derby Road from first floor window on the southern elevation, and the applicant has again confirmed that this window will be also replaced with obscure glazing, with these matters covered by planning conditions. As part of the plans, the existing driveway will be of sufficient size to provide 4 off-street parking spaces for staff and/or visitors, including a disabled parking space as and when required. For the scope of the development, this level of parking is considered satisfactory by the County Highways Authority. The external outside space to the front of the property is a mix of hard surface driveway and shrubbery, and there is a large rear garden, to the rear of the property, with mature hedging and trees to the boundaries, giving a high degree of privacy both to the children and young people using the garden and to other surrounding residential properties. The application supports both the County Council in meeting the needs of children in its care under its sufficiency duty, placing children in a typical home setting in a familiar area, and the collaborative working between the City and County Councils in Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. The property will be converted into a collaborative specialist home for the area's most vulnerable children to significantly improve the outcomes for those with challenging behaviour and/or complex mental health needs. Accommodation will be provided for short to medium-term respite care for those at risk of needing mental health inpatient services or those leaving it, or where placement breakdown has occurred. Support is focused on stabilising a single child or young person, with a second child being carefully introduced if both individual needs are met. There is evidence of a relatively high local need within the district of Ashfield, with the area being identified as having the highest level of need within the county at 22.5% of the total looked after children population. As the children require care and are not self-sufficient, the house requires a change of use from a residential dwelling to a C2 use as a children's home. In principle, it is considered that children's homes can operate successfully alongside other residential uses, and policy support is provided under, say, policy HG8 of the Ashfield Local Plan Review, which supports the use of buildings as residential care homes where it is acceptable in terms of residential amenity impacts. The proposal is considered compliant with the objectives of this policy, subject to planning conditions set out in Appendix 1, placing controls over the use of the home. Occupancy of the property will be similar to the occupation of a dwelling house, with the number of care staff and children not exceeding those of a traditional family unit, who would reasonably be expected to occupy what is a relatively large 4-bedroom detached house on a larger than average plot. Such a small-scale children's home would not be inappropriate in a residential street setting or out of character for the area. There are not considered to be any unacceptable residential amenity impacts. Neighbour representations have raised concerns regarding the location's suitability for placement of vulnerable children, citing traffic impacts and limited on-street parking, increases in noise levels, and a decline in the peaceful enjoyment of homes. There are concerns as to the types of children that would occupy the home, particularly regarding antisocial behaviour, given the proximity of a local primary school and nursery childcare facility, with particular concern for those with young children. The MPPF at paragraphs 96 and 102 support healthy, inclusive and safe places so that crime and disorder does not undermine quality of life. Such concerns amongst local residents are a material consideration. However, on balance, the County Council as corporate parent would manage and operate the care home in accordance with established national childcare practices, including registering the home with Ofsted, catering for an extremely limited number of children at any one time, with a staff-to-child ratio of 1:1, appropriate supervision and care will be ensured. The low-level occupation would indirectly control noise levels, and a planning condition would limit the number of children in residential care to 2 at any one time. It is not anticipated that noise will be above that associated with a typical residential dwelling. The home will be run in a way which respects its residential location and is sympathetic to neighbouring properties, including contact details for the home's manager being made available to residents. The process will be put in place to enable an appropriate response from the police should it be necessary. The property would also be inspected by Ofsted. As such, the development is considered capable of complying with the objectives of the MPPF. Overall, the development would be suitably mitigated and integrated into its residential setting. As such, the proposed development would be in accordance with the objectives of, say, policy HG8 and ST1 of the Ashfield Local Plan Review and would not adversely affect the character, quality, amenity or safety of the environment, nor would it adversely affect highway safety or conflict with other uses. The proposed development is considered to be acceptable development in this location subject to conditions. It's therefore recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan. I now invite County Councillor Rory Green to speak as a local member. Councillor Green, you can speak for up to 10 minutes and you will be given notification at 30 seconds when the time's left. Thank you very much.
Chair. I don't think I will need 10 minutes, but I am known to talk a bit, so keep it short. I'm just going to read a bit off the script. I think it's probably put a lot of time into trying to communicate this fairly to residents and also the long-term impact of our community and also taxpayers. So as County Councillor for Kirkby South, I've taken the time to carefully consider the proposal for a children's home in Kirkby and Ashfield. This process has included direct engagement that I've spent on the ground with local residents through a range of channels. So I was trying my best to listen closely to their views, concerns and aspirations of the community. I've scrutinised the issues, including effective safeguarding practices, staffing levels at the care home, parking provision and a broader impact on the local community. These concerns are truly valid and they have deserved thoughtful consideration from myself. Having done so after addressing my own queries on these matters, I am satisfied that these concerns can and will be managed responsibly by the provider, and I'm therefore happy to support the proposal. I'm just going to elaborate a little bit more on why so. Our young people across this county deserve not only a stable home environment, but one that is person-centred on their own individual needs. The proposal offers those person-centred care packages I fully understand, and that the young people today are truly facing real difficult social, emotional, behavioural challenges. I have confidence that the provider is committed to delivering high quality specialist care and will continue to engage thoroughly and positively with the local community should the proposal be approved. I know of this care provider that spends a lot of time as well on building relationships with residents and neighbours even before the home is established. I've seen that firsthand in my life as well. Smaller bed home environments are essential to delivering better outcomes for children in care rather than old institutionalised approaches where you get 5, 6 bedders. And then we saw the scandals of the past decades with that independent inquiry because of these large institutional homes. So these smaller settings are really effective for that sense. They really create a stability and a belonging, and that tailored support, like I said, in those other larger ranges you just can't achieve. Importantly, by supporting vulnerable young people effectively at this stage, we at the County Council have a statutory obligation to help reduce that long-term impact of adverse childhood experiences. That's whether parents are in prison, parents could be alcoholics, drug users, of the like. Finally, I recognise that good quality residential provision, such as this, not only improves the lives, but it also delivers us better value for money for us, the people of this county, the taxpayer. Supporting local homes for local children reduces the reliance on costly out-of-area placements. I don't know if anyone in the room knows more about it, but it exponentially increases when we're going out of county. So the county council is trying to streamline provisions by keeping it in county and by using these 2-bedder, 3-bedder maximum therapeutic approaches are a lot more better for the taxpayer. I also believe for the families themselves in terms of reintegration with those families, if that is a possible avenue and safeguarded appropriately, that they're truly connected. And what you tend to find with these young people is they do run back home quite frequently. That is a characteristic trait that can occur. I want to truly say I remain committed to the people of Kirkby South and ensuring that varied views of our residents are truly heard, and I believe I've demonstrated that over the last couple of months by being proactive in that, as well as actually the highest standard of care for the children in this county. I believe this proposal is a positive step in the right direction for the people of Nottinghamshire and our young people who have a duty of care. And there's a long-term investment here that if we don't invest in things like this, I personally think the taxpayer will suffer. I mentioned adverse childhood experiences earlier. If you look at the prison population, 90+% of the male prison population have 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. So these homes are there to mitigate that and to try and prevent that. So yeah, just lastly, I just want to say I'm happy to support the proposal. Thank you for my time to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Do officers wish to clarify any points made by?
No, Chair.
I now invite Donna Gadimi and Beth Downing on behalf of the applicants. Donna or Beth to speak for 3 minutes. You'll again be given 30 seconds notification before the end of your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Our children in care deserve all the support we can give them, and approving planning permission would allow us to continue with our ambition to grow the number of residential homes in Nottinghamshire, to provide more children with a better chance in life in their home county, close to their families and communities, and in good quality homes, rather than placing children out of county. To put this into context, we currently have 118 children placed in homes outside of Nottinghamshire. Of the 69 residential care homes that we currently use in Nottinghamshire, only 3 of those are in Ashfield, and they provide 5 beds. There are a total of 236 children in care who originate from Ashfield,
which accounts for about 26% of the overall looked after population. It is for this reason that we are striving to provide more residential care within Ashfield in order to keep children close to their schools and family networks. Whilst there is a substantial programme of work to increase the number of foster carers, unfortunately there is still a lack of foster placements available, and therefore we have to look for residential placements. I hope to be able to reassure you regarding the concerns that have been raised about suitability of the location for a care home, potential traffic and parking issues, noise disturbances and the impact on residential amenity, and need for clear management and supervision details. We acknowledge that Derby Road is predominantly residential. Our proposed home aims to blend seamlessly with the neighbourhood while fulfilling a crucial need for care facilities for vulnerable children. We are committed to maintaining the residential character and ensuring minimal disruption. I wish to assure you that a rigorous selection process will ensure the provider who delivers the care in this home is experienced at establishing new homes and delivering high quality care with positive outcomes for children. The home will be registered with Ofsted, who will provide regulatory oversight of the care and the management and leadership of the home. The provider will aim to integrate themselves within the community as best as possible and will hold a community event welcoming local residents and interested councillors to view this home should planning permission be granted. All modern children's homes are designed to replicate a typical family home, and this one will also meet high standards, feel homely and welcoming. Our proposal is to only have a maximum of 2 children living at this home at any one time. These young people and the staff caring for them should not have any greater impact on noise, drainage and parking that would be expected with a large family home such as this. Staff rotas and changeovers will be managed efficiently to avoid disruptions. We're also committed to obscuring any windows that overlook neighbouring properties to protect the privacy of those residents. Our home will have designated parking spaces for staff and visitors to reduce on-street parking. The proposed number of car parking spaces meets Nottinghamshire County Council's commercial parking standard, and there is adequate space to manoeuvre vehicles without impacting on the highway. As with all of these types of homes, to reassure neighbours should they have any concerns, that will be provided with the home manager's contact details. And finally, to conclude, I support the officer's report and recommendation to grant planning permission.
Thank you. Do the officers wish to respond?
No, Chair.
I will now open the floor for debate. Does the committee have any comments or questions regarding the applications? If you could raise your hands and I'll take a note. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Janette Barlow, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I only have one sort of quite a simple question. Obviously with regard to the staffing, and obviously bearing in mind it is obviously for just 2 children, how many members of staff would actually be in the team that would be looking after them, sort of overall?
Could you answer that question?
Yeah, I believe the report sets out that not in terms of how many different individuals would be there. I don't know whether the applicant can help on that, if we're allowed to ask them, Chair.
I'll allow the applicant to answer that question, please. I do feel it's important.
Thank you. So there will be a rota. The provider will determine the staffing structure. As it's been said, there will be a minimum of 1-to-1, depending how the provider establishes their rota. There could be potentially between 7 and 10 different staff supporting those children to cover for holidays. You'd have a registered manager, potentially a deputy manager, and then the staff caring for the young person.
Thank you.
Councillor Carr, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find myself in agreement with Councillor Green, and let's hope it's not the last time that I'm in agreement with you. But this, you know, in a normal circumstance, in a house, you've got absolutely no control on who moves into next to you. And the only reason we're here today is because it's change of use to something else that's not quite a household. We've been told that the actual staffing is going to be on a 1-to-1 basis, which is good. And my goodness me, isn't this actually better than what we had in past years? huge homes full of children not being looked after on a one-to-one basis. And I support the change of use to facilitate this. Thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Not to repeat what Councillor Carr and Councillor Green have said, but having children in the community is exactly where they need to be for better outcomes, and the commute to the local towns is perfect for that. So I think that's really good, and it's great to see that we're not making any changes to the outside of the property, because we do need that parking. There'll be a lot of visits and professionals going into that home every day of the week, and it's important that that is done within the curtilage of the property. So it's pleasing to see that the applicant has done that. Could I just ask a question to planning officers about the cost of the works to do the inside up with the en-suites, etc., and the windows, and the speed of that? And then a subsequent question to that is, do we take when we're looking at properties to buy in the areas where there's need, i.e. Ashfield, do we take the cost of the property and the cost of the renovations together and look at other properties? Because this is quite a substantive property on an expensive road. So I just want to check that going forward that's taken into account, rather than we just buy one and then worry about the cost of the renovations after.
The cost is not something that's been considered. It's not necessarily a material consideration. I don't know whether the applicant can provide any comment on that. In terms of obscure glazing, condition 5 does require that obscure glazing to be in place before the building is brought into use as a children's home. So the children's home will not be occupied until that glazing is provided.
Thank you. Councillor Choudhury, please.
For the officers, and what a beautiful way to present application to Rory Green Councillor, our friend. And I agree with, I have no objection with this, and subject to Ashfield District Council's no objection, NCC, Highway Ashfield, no objection. So I would totally agree with the application. Go forward. Thank you very much.
Councillor Smith, David Smith. Thank you.
Yeah, I quite agree with it as well. I think it's very good. I've only got one question for officers, because like where they're talking about you can have 7 to 10 staff. Looking at the diagram of the actual building car park, where the car park is, you know, where there's like a green verge, could that be, could they make that into like tarmac that bit and make it so can I get another 2 cars? You know, where you've got about 4 and another one makes 5. Could that be altered, you know, to have another 2 cars in there for them? This is only a question.
Yeah, I mean, the application has been assessed by highways officers on the basis of those 4 parking spaces that you will have seen on your plans being provided, and they've got no concerns about that. You know, if it was deemed that there wasn't sufficient parking at some point in the future, then yeah, ways to address that could be looked at along the lines of what you've described. But I think if there is existing vegetation on, you know, in the front garden, as well as the extensive driveway, I mean, it is extensive. I think if we can retain that wherever possible, it would just help in terms of, you know, in terms of minimising the impact of this development.
Well, it just takes it off the road, and that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, it would do, yeah, but you know, on the basis of what's been submitted in the application, you know, parking provision as provided is considered to be sufficient.
Thank you. Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I'm fully in support of these recommendations. It's definitely the way forward for our children in care. It just says children's home. Is there an age limit if it'll not come back as an adult place, or does that have to be changed? What's the age?
I believe it's 10 to 18.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. It's quite a clear consensus then, but I will ask the members to vote. Would all those in favour of approving the recommendations please raise your hand? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 9 on the agenda is the government consultation on planning committee reforms. The Council's proposed response to technical consultation on reform of planning committees, including a national scheme of delegation, changes to the size and makeup of committees and mandatory member training. The report seeks approval for the proposed response. I move the recommendations in the report.
I second the recommendations and retain the right to speak. Thank you.
Okay, I invite Jonathan Smith, Team Manager, Development Manager, to present the report. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report seeks the approval of the committee to submit the County Council's response to the government's technical consultation on the reform of planning committees. The consultation covers three main areas. Firstly, a national scheme of delegation is proposed, which seeks to assign different types of planning applications into either what are being called Tier A or Tier B. Tier A applications would always be determined by officers under delegated powers, whilst Tier B applications would be delegated subject to a triage process through which the chair of committee and the chief planning officer must mutually agree that an application should go to committee if they are to depart from the assumed delegation. The draft response highlights the need for any triage process to ensure that decision making can still be made efficiently at all times. The government seeks to control the size and composition of committees with a limit of 11 elected members, which reflects the committee we have here today. The draft response suggests that committee sizes might wish to reflect the overall number of elected members at any particular authority, and also highlights the importance that the makeup of committees reflects the geography of the administrative area. Finally, mandatory member training is also proposed, which is something that the County Council has provided members with for a long time. The draft response highlights the need for member training to reflect the types of applications dealt with by differing authorities, such as county councils with their minerals and waste remit. Officers seek member approval to submit the draft response set out at Appendix B of the report, and will be happy to take on board any comments and suggestions that members might have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. I will now open the debate. Do members have comments or questions on the proposed response? Councillor Janette Barlow, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've looked at this and I think that, yes, I agree with the fact it should be mandatory training, but I also think numbers need to be looked at with a minimum and a maximum. I don't think necessarily it should be 11. I think it should be representative of the area, and also a minimum should then be representative of the area.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have grave concerns about the government's planning policy changes. It's basically a way of stripping away democratic representation of residents and cramming through all their applications to meet Angela Rayner's housing target. That's the whole purpose of these amendments that all councils across the country are being asked to approve, and we need to stand up and be counted on behalf of our residents, because you can bet your bottom dollar it's more of a district matter than a county matter, because housing will go to the districts. But you can bet your bottom dollar that I've read it, and if an application comes forward on a site that's within the local plan, it will just go through, won't go to committee. And what will happen is you'll have massive impact on the green belt, massive increase in flooding right across our county, and we as the lead flood authority will be responsible for reacting to that with our partners. And I think this response gives us a chance to make our voices heard, particularly around question 5 in Appendix B, page 128, where it says, do we as councillors, don't forget it's us that are being asked to respond, do we as councillors think there should be a mechanism to bring a Tier A application to committee in exceptional circumstances? And our response at the moment has been drafted by officers, says that the fact that it provides clarity that A is done by officers and B is done by committee is fine. So in short, no, we don't think at the moment, as has been drafted, that there should be a mechanism to bring Tier A applications to this committee. I fundamentally, absolutely clearly disagree, completely disagree with that. There should be a mechanism to allow councillors to consider applications that will fall under Tier A, because believe you me, we'll all have to deal with it on the doorsteps when you're knocking on doors or when you're reading your inbox, because there's all these concerns about flooding or whatever, or mineral plans going through that we didn't consider at this committee, or schools being built without parking drop-off bays and yellow lines on roads. That's what will happen. That is what will happen day in, day out if this goes through. So I ask you, Chairman, to agree with me that we change that answer and completely disagree with the question and insert the reasons that I've just given, which would need to be drafted far better than I can allude in this meeting. But I can't vote for it if we do not amend the answer to question 5. Thank you.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree totally with what Councillor Smith has just said. This is an attempt by this government to wrench the planning system out of democratic control. It's not right. It's completely against every single democratic principle we've held in this country, at least since the war, the last war. And I just do not think it is right. And I would agree with what Councillor Smith said about amending some of the questions, answers to the questions. Another thing, of course, is that we're doing this at the same time as local government reform. Talk about, messing things up and throwing things in the air and see where they land. It is ridiculous. So, the answer to question 3, do you think further to the working paper on revising development thresholds could consider some applications for medium resident development? Well, you've put no, it won't impact on the county council. Well, no, it won't. But are we going to be here in 4 years' time? We don't know. Then it would impact what this council becomes at that time. And so we cannot ignore local government reform in this, and the same goes for question 7 as well. I'm a little bit perplexed, though, that we seem to have an explanation and an answer to every single question, except when it gets to 18, 19 and 20, which are businesses, people, and people with protected characteristics, where we just put no. I think, quite honestly, as a councillor, I often get contacted by people who do not understand the planning system, but have had a letter come through the door. And I'm thinking with regards to protected characteristics, disabled people, because disability under the Act isn't just physical disability, it's all disabilities. Where is the democratic control as me as a councillor to represent that person when it's going to go through delegated decision? That is a big concern for me. And also, we've put, do you have any views on the implications of these proposals for considerations of the 5 environmental principles? No. No. Just 2 letters and a full stop. So all I would ask there is that officers who will have the delegated powers, and I do have delegated powers at the moment, are they bound by these principles, which are integration, prevention, rectification, polluter pays, and precautionary measures before any decisions are taken? Because I think that question 18, 19 and 20 deserve more of a response than no, no response, no. Thank you.
Are there any other councillors, members wish to speak?
What I've just said, because I totally agree with that. You know,
Okay.
because we're the ones what's up against the residents, and they need to know what's happening.
Thank you, Councillor David Smith. Councillor Andy Brown, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to concur with comments that's been made by everybody, and it's not very often I agree with what Councillor Carr said, but today I've got to agree with everything he said.
Strange
Thank you,
times we
Chair.
live in, Councillor.
Okay. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Just with that consensus around particularly question 5, but what Councillor Carr was alluding to, can I move an amendment to the recommendations then that we don't approve it as set out, and we look forward to the amendments coming forward that we've spoke about for confirmation from this committee, and amendments to the wording, please. I'll formally move that amendment, please.
Thanks to Councillor Smith. Can I just ask the other members of the committee if they would want this taken away and an amendment by the officers bringing back? We should like to debate, sorry, rather than...
Chairman, can we ask officers to respond to the proposed amendment?
Okay. Could I ask the officers to respond to the proposed amendments? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to take on board. The issue we have is that closing day for this is tomorrow. Well, to be honest, this is the first committee we've had since the consultation opened, so it's could well be, yeah. But we have the options to try and take on board the comments of the committee, and what we would normally do if we were dealing with a planning application and we say we were going to add a condition to an approval or amend a condition, we would normally do that amendment and seek approval through the chair and the vice chair. Given the time limits we are under, that to me feels to be like the only possible way of getting a response through which takes on board, because we're not going to meet again in sufficient time. Or I don't know, with members' commitment, I could send a revised set of responses around to all of you, and
yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think and Jonathan's outlined the main challenge there. So I think the comments are really sensible and understood. So we'll obviously capture those in that revision, which we can do later today into tomorrow. I then think if we circulate that with the nod that Jonathan will get that submitted, what I wouldn't want to do is not put a submission forward and just leave a blank, because I think that would be detrimental. So if Jonathan captures thoughts from today, adds into some of those areas discussed around where we've put a blank at the moment or an NA, and we can ensure then we recirculate that in advance of the submission tomorrow. But obviously, given the tight timeline, there won't be opportunity to come back and discuss it.
yeah, and just going back to this question 5, I mean, the list of developments that would be in Tier A as set out in the consultation, they include, I'll read them out: applications for planning permission for household development, minor commercial development, minor residential development, applications for reserved matter approvals, applications for a non-material amendment, applications for approval of conditions, applications for approval of a BNG plan, applications for approval of prior approval for permitted development rights, applications for lawful development certificates, and applications for a certificate appropriate alternative development. In terms of those top 3, the household development, minor commercial, and minor residential, clearly they're not applications that come to this authority. So, I mean, I'm happy to amend the answer to question 5, but it will be to have that caveat that question 5 really you know, Tier A applications are not really things that are going to impact on us anyway. Discharging conditions and dealing with non-material amendments are already delegated to officers, so there will be no change then. But I'm happy to make that point, but then also try and capture what your sentiment as well.
Councillor Carr?
Given the short space of time you've got to do this, rather churlishly refer you to Broxtowe Borough Council's reply to this consultation, which was extremely robust, can I use that word, to the government's proposals. And I think if other members actually try and get sight of that, it is on the website. I think it probably reflects what we're thinking over this side of the room as well. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Being new to this, what's the ramifications if we don't pass it here today, just for information?
Well, I think to kind of go back to what Wayne said, you know, it's probably the right thing to do for this authority to submit a response. What the government does with that response and what it does with all the other responses it receives is entirely up to them. You know, it could be fait accompli. They've already decided what they're going to do, but I still think we need to have our voice heard. It is important. So yeah, it is worth our while trying to get something submitted.
Will there be any chance to amend it down the line?
They've already done a prior consultation where, in terms of what was going to be delegated, what was going to be committee, was quite different. So they've had responses to that, and they have listened. But you know, it makes you wonder how long they want this process to go on for. Ultimately, they'll want to make a decision because this is all tied up with the planning and infrastructure bill, and they'll want to bring it forward. You know, in good time, I would have thought.
Any other comments, committee?
So, Chairman, it sounds like, from the sound of it, members over here who have proposed the amendment are happy to accept what has been agreed over here and offered over here by members, which is to take into consideration and to revise parts of the proposed response, taking into consideration what's been raised here today. So if members are happy with that, then we can accept that and we can go on to look at the main recommendations which you've already moved.
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, the committee, from what I've heard, cannot vote for the recommendation as written on page 124 that says that we approve the response. We don't approve the response. So an amendment needs to be moved and seconded, which we have done. I'm open to the wording from the top there, but it needs to be something along the lines of the Planning and Rights of Way Committee have considered the draft response, rejected it, and expect tweaks to it to come back and be circulated after the meeting. That's what we've agreed between us. That's what the recommendation needs to say, and I move that as a formal amendment to the recommendations.
So, Chair, that's subject to the changes that have been proposed today. So that's what we'd be voting on.
Okay.
Next.
So I'm going to move that to a vote then. All those in favour?
That's unanimous.
That's unanimous. The next item on the agenda is item 10, Development Management Progress Report. Item 10 on the agenda is a Management Progress Report. I invite Jonathan Smith, Team Manager, Development Manager, to present the report. Jonathan to present.
Thank you, Chair. This is a committee, this is a report we bring to every Planning Rights of Way committee. And it just basically gives you an update on the work that the development management team has been doing in terms of determining planning applications. So Appendix A highlights the applications received and those determined between the 21st of February, which is when the last report was up to, and the 30th of June. And Appendix B reports on the County Council performance, and then Appendix C, we set out our future work programme and setting out what applications we anticipate coming to committee at future committees, in particular September committee. And I'd be grateful, Chair, if you just give me the opportunity to take this opportunity to thank Rebecca, who has compiled these reports over the last 5 years or so. Rebecca's leaving us for pastures new in August, so this will be the last time you will see her at committee. So thank you very much, Rebecca. Sorry for embarrassing.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. You've done 5 years. Does the committee have any comments or questions regarding the report?
Chair, on page, it hasn't got a page number, the schedule of future planning, target committee September, land north of Ratcliffe and Onslow Power Station. We're waiting for information on ecology. Is it likely that that planning application will be in September, do we think? Because whilst the actual land itself is in another division in Rushcliffe, it actually really does affect divisions in Broxtowe, because the Attenborough Nature Reserve is just the other side of the river. And I'd be, if you can, give an indication whether it will be September, that would be brilliant.
I can't confirm. The hope is that we will get it to September. The impacts, I believe the impacts on the SSSI, which Attenborough Nature Reserve is one of those ecological issues that still needs to be addressed. So yeah, the information needs to come in, and then we send it out to consultees, and we're reliant on consultees not raising objections before we can take the application forward. But at the moment, we are trying to target September committee.
I believe it's actually come in as well.
It has come in now, has it? Right, okay, yeah.
Any further members? Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. Similar to Councillor Carr, but mine's regarding to the September possible going to committee of the Bartling Favours mineral extraction. How likely is that to be, considering this has been going on for nearly 12 years now?
Well, I'll say I'll pass on to Joel, because Joel's the case officer of the application, might be able to provide a more detailed response.
Thank you. Yes, we are out to consultation again on another package of further information that has been submitted. So we do have to keep an open mind to an extent on that, because we are waiting for the views of various people and certainly key consultees on that technical information. We are conscious, however, that local community do want to hear a decision on that planning application before too long. And there does come a point where that decision point needs to be made. So we are working as hard as we can to get it to one of these committees, September possibly.
Any other members wishing to speak? No. The report is noted. There being no further business, I will be bringing this meeting to a close. But before I finish, I'd just like to thank the officers for attending. I'd like to personally thank every member of the committee for full attendance. And I'd like to thank Democratic Services and our legal team and our Vice Chairman for their intervention. Thank you very much.